Okay.
Everybody, thank you very much for all turning up tonight. And another night at the pigsty, another interview at the pigsty. Tonight we are very, very lucky to have, a YouTube legend or just a YouTube old man. He's been going since 2008, going a long time, and has been around, seen everything come and go, seen people come and go. Tonight we have Noel Plum. So Noel, if you just want to let people know who don't know who you are, what you are, and who you are and what you do. Can you hear me okay, Noel? Noel?
If you can just give me 1 second, I'm getting the sound twice. So let me just figure out what I'm doing here. Yes, I can hear you okay. I could just hear you twice, that was all. Not quite sure what was happening there. Right, who am I and what do I do? Well, I don't know.
Mute the live stream, perhaps.
Wow. I'm still hearing everything twice. Just 1 second, 1 second. I think I figured it.
Live production, man. It happens all the time.
Okay, I'm thinking that's it. I had another browser window I didn't realise which had the feed on it. And the slight delay. Sorry about that.
Man, it's normal. I usually forget to unmute. I usually forget to unmute.
Dickhead with a slaphead messes it up. Right. So yeah, I've been on YouTube, I suppose, since about 2008. Started as very much as a YouTube atheist channel. That was exactly what I started as, just to talk about those kinds of issues, and then it sort of branched out as a result of having interest in other things and wanting to talk about those things, and as a result of various events that sort of took place, especially around 2012. So I still run a YouTube channel. I have my main channel, Noel Plum, and then a channel, Noel Hand Grenade, which is where I sort of make sort of off the cuff videos. Still talk about atheist material.
The drunk streams on the hand grenade is quite funny.
With the kind of no videos for 2 months and then 3 in about 40 minutes. So I still do the same kind of thing. I still make videos about religion, God belief, discuss surveys related to that and different subjects. But then I also last year I talked a lot about the subjects of trans women in sport, which is a subject which ties in a number of interests of mine. So I talk about other things as well, really. It's my channel, I suppose, so yeah. I use it as a vehicle for the things I'm interested in.
Well, it was in the round last year. I looked back and seen it was May 2009, I think it was the video that I started. And I'd seen 1 or 2 of your videos, just in passing, just some guy on the internet, this one video on the one topic that you're streaming about at that time,
Yeah.
And as you got to meet earlier, it was Spooky Bedher. He sent me a link to a video. I can't remember the exact name. It was a drama video. It was focusing specifically on that drama. And what caught my eye and made me hang about then afterwards was the hilarity, the entertainment, because you brought out your fucking kid's dinosaur. I don't know if you remember doing that video.
Yeah, I do think I remember that, yeah. Yeah, it plays a tune, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like the Venga Boys. It's like
the Venga Boys, that's exactly it, man. I was watching that and going over, and it really gave me, as I said to you before we came on stream, it really slammed home with me the fact that you're very objective. You are definitely honest about your bias. Don't get me wrong. You've said some things in the channel that a lot of people on certain sides could disagree with. So you're definitely honest about where you stand. But I do feel that even when you do present the information and the data, as you say, you do a lot of surveys and stuff, I find your interpretation of it is very objective.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd certainly something I try and do. Like you say, nobody comes from a totally dispassionate, disinterested perspective. But I think there's something that seems to be going on now, which is where that seems to be undervalued. A lot of things nowadays seem to be about narrative and perspective, and unless people say things like, well, unless you're a woman, you shouldn't be talking about abortion, or unless unless you're from an ethnic minority, then you should shut up and listen on matters of race. And that is not the entirety of the human experience. I mean, the whole point of a court of law is that the judge who sits over that court of law is a disinterested party, and so we see some sort of advantage in that objective, disinterested perspective, as well as obviously the advantages of people who have personal experience. And I think sometimes that gets a little bit devalued, you know.
I can definitely agree with that. Yeah, maybe a few months ago, especially whenever the George Floyd thing was happening, there was a stream that a friend of ours was doing, and they did reach out to a few people of colour to come onto the stream. It was already scheduled, that other stuff going on, so she just went with the stream as you would. And personally, my girlfriend was on. She's from Georgia. She's very left wing. She's an awful lot to say on the topic, you know, and rightfully so. But it doesn't negate the fact that she's not of colour, that everything she had to say was worthwhile. And there was people in the live chat, and the stream itself did get some, you know, there was some feedback that wasn't good because there was no people of colour on the channel. And it doesn't negate what they have to say because of that.
Yeah, there's both sides to that coin, and it's good that there is material on YouTube and people on YouTube who have a very particular perspective and just sell their perspective, because that's effectively, like in a court of law, that's what you have. You have a couple of advocates or teams of advocates that sell their cases, and you want that, and you need the people without the experience that you have on those as well. But there's also a big benefit for having people who will sometimes just sit back and maybe don't even have much of a dog in the fight, particularly, but there's some benefit to that. You can maybe evaluate things from a more dispassionate perspective sometimes like that, I think.
Yeah, well, referring it back to yourself, man, you know, I'm quite excited about having you here tonight. Was very much looking forward to it, because a lot of your stuff is edited. There isn't that many live interviews, so, you know, I feel very privileged to have you here tonight. And talking to different people from the scene that would be part of, we have the pigsty community here, the people that would follow my channel, and depending on who you would talk to, like Spooky or other people like Dorgendorp and Megadurk and things like that, who have been in the community for a very long time, were, holy fuck, he's landed a big fish, what's this about, and all the rest of it. And you talk to the other people that's only in the community the guts of a year, maybe only even 2 years, and they're like, who the fuck's Noel Plum, like?
that's a sign of a channel that's been going too long, isn't it? heading south at a fast
Well, no, but you still do, in my opinion, man, you still do produce good content. You've seen me a couple of times on Twitter. I definitely try and share it out and let people know, because I do think that you have an objective view. And I can't remember what video it was or when it was or whatever, and not even the phrase, but it's something similar that I use that stuck in my mind. And whenever we're trying to get equality with everybody, we're trying to bring that level up to everybody. We're not trying to take away from what people are. And the way I look at it is, equality is being able to insult everybody equally. You know, if you're an asshole, it doesn't matter what color of skin you are, you know, what gender you are, who you do in your bedroom. It makes no difference. If you're an asshole, I'm going to call you an asshole. And certain people are, oh, you can't say that because of X, you know. And it's the equality is, I'm calling you an asshole because of what you are. Nothing to do with that at all.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I've sometimes said with punching up, you know, punch someone because they deserve a punch. Don't just punch them because they're bigger, you know. I think there's an element of that with all the sort of atheism thing, which is that I'm not saying that people go onto YouTube for the wrong reasons, because that's wrong. That's not what I'm trying to say. But people often go on to talk about a particular subject. So they'll make a sort of atheist channel because that is something that they are so motivated about. And unfortunately, that means that you get a kind of very skewed perspective then of the people that are representing atheists online. Because most people who don't believe in God and you might class as an atheist would never really give a crap about it. They would never be motivated to do that kind of thing. And I think that's virtually something I've experienced, is that as I've branched out and talked about different subjects, that's almost a universal truth online, which is that you always get a very skewed perspective of people. The poles of any argument are always overrepresented, maybe because they're the more interesting people to listen to. You don't want to hear somebody say, well, yeah, I mainly agree with this, but don't agree with that part, or maybe if you take a bit of this and a bit of that, or whatever. You won't hear somebody to be pointing at the camera and saying, you know, these fuckers, you know, we should listen to people, send them to the wall and shoot them through the back of the head. You know, that's the more exciting sort of thing, I suppose. So it rewards that. The whole online experience rewards that, I think, and it becomes sort of overrepresented.
Oh, I would definitely agree with you there. Extremism to a point, you know, in drama and stuff like that, it definitely sells on YouTube because people do like entertainment. And as
They
you
do, yeah.
out,
I do as well. I'm not
yeah, as you pointed out, I have been rewatching a few of your videos and stuff just to refresh my memory. But as you pointed out on the non sequitur breakdown one, the fact that they lost so many subscribers, people will still stay subscribed to a channel for the drama, even if they don't like it and things like that. They just like, oh, let's see what the cunt says next.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes, and it's what is shocking is how high those percentages can be. I stay subscribed up until very recently to Feminist Frequency, the channel, you know, Anita Sarkeesian and all that lot.
That one I know, but yeah.
Right, so she made a video, Anita Sarkeesian made a video in which she was critiquing tropes in video games of women. And it became quite a big thing. She became one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people of the year, and
something about that, yeah.
She got bomb threats and all sorts, and ended up. It was one of these situations where, like you often see, the person ends up talking more and more famous for talking more about themselves than they are about the subject they were talking about. But she had a couple of 100,000 subscribers on a Feminist Frequency channel where she was making this series of videos that were being funded by this Kickstarter campaign, and they were getting hundreds of thousands of views. Some of them may have got millions of views, right? And I stayed subscribed to that channel, and the material sort of drifted onto other things, but I stayed subscribed, and the views went down, so they were getting less views per video than my little channel, right? She'd get sort of 800, 900 views on a video, something like that. And
your videos are easily sitting up at about 3,000 and 4,000, like.
and then you realise just what a percentage of people were subscribed to that channel and watching those videos just for the drama, and either because they didn't like it or because they were supporting it, but not necessarily because they were interested, but just because she's on their side.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like the percentage of people that were effectively, in some ways you could say, watching it for the wrong reasons, you know, the negative reasons, rather than because they actually enjoyed the material for its own sake, and actually was interested in that particular subject, you know, and so wanted to stay engaged in it once the drama had passed off, once that had drifted away.
No, I can definitely agree with you. As a man, you know, the Mathpig name does, not that I'm anyway educated outside of a year in university in Queens for fucking doing maths, but, you know, I do like my graphs. You know, I'm not going to get sexually excited about them, but I do like my graphs, you know, and things like that. And analytics on YouTube is a lot of fun. You know, if you start using it and working about with it, it's an awful lot of fun. And looking at that is something, you know, people come out and go, but I've got 5,000 subscribers. Your fucking video got 100 views.
Yeah, yes.
You know, and it really does come down to that. As personally looking at my channel now, there has been a very slow growth in subscribers here. I'm going, as of last week, a full year. We've just, you know, we're nearly at 750. But my watch time and my views for a channel this size, like, I'm just shy of 8,000 hours. You know, I've double what I need for monetization, because I think that the content is good. You know, people appreciate the banter and they appreciate that. And every week we do try and change it up. The people are different, the interviews are different. But as you can say, it's not, oh, we watched it for 3 weeks, they were great, fuck it, I'm just still subscribed.
Yeah. And it's you've got to, the thing is that the most important thing is that you've got to enjoy the content you're making. Got to enjoy the content you're making, because it's so easy to start getting audience led and end up doing what sells, you know, what's giving you the little tickling you under the chin. And then you can soon find that you're tied in then. You end up hemmed in with an audience that now subscribed expecting a particular thing, which wasn't really what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
You know, and sure, you're successful, but you're successful maybe making something that you didn't really want to make. And if you just want to run it as a business and that's it, well, then I suppose it doesn't really matter what you're making videos on. But most people don't go into it for that. They'd like to be successful. Of course they would. You're not going to sit here talking at a camera and not want people to listen to what you've got to say. But most people want to talk about the things that they want to talk about, and you can easily end up getting pulled away from that, I think.
Well, I personally, for the channel here, we're aiming for, you know, I used to say at the start, I'm trying to bring it back, sort of like an Irish pub on a Friday night, man. You know, you have people come in, you have the conversations, you have maybe debates and this, that, and the other. You get drunk, you talk about God, you maybe get in a row outside, but, you know, the cunt that punched you last week is going to buy you a pint next week. You know, and you can get to that heated debate without having to be an extremist, you know. I fuck you off, so that means you never come back again. No, I was emotional at the time. You said something, we disagree on it. It doesn't necessarily mean that I hate you. It just means at that particular moment I wanted to fucking rip your head off. Yeah, exactly.
You know, I know where you're coming from with that, So that's like real life, though, isn't it? That's like real life, not online.
Well, that's, again, another thing that we find with online is, you know, I'm going to ask you, man, like, we know that you are a fireman, you have mentioned that online, but you have no real formal training or anything like that, or, you know, in philosophy and things like that. These are just hobbies, for, you know, interests and things that you've picked up.
It is. I went to university, did a degree in engineering acoustics, so that wasn't really relevant. And then ended up joining the fire service, which was totally not relevant to any of that. It's just all these things are lay interest. I was quite fortunate, really. My father had a real interest in science. A lay interest again, but like he went to geology conferences and all kinds of things. He'd write and say, "Can I come to this conference because I've got an interest in this stuff?" And he'd be there with it. It would all be lecturers and stuff, you know. Real interest in geology, but also in things like quantum mechanics, special and general relativity, origins of the universe.
I'd like your dad.
And God questions, stuff like that. But the interesting thing was, he brought me up so that there wasn't, and this is something that I've seen, is for a lot of people, their upbringing is such that questions about things like God are treated in a different way to the sort of scientific questions about, well, how did the universe start, or something to do with you know, physics or what have you, or evolutionary biology. They treat these as two separate things. I wasn't ever brought up like that. He brought me up. I mean, my mother brought me up as well, but I didn't have that intellectual sort of side with my mother. He brought me up that it was just another question that you could examine.
Yeah.
And he was very open-minded. He regarded himself as an agnostic, and not that makes you more open-minded, but from my perspective, well, I was 6 years old. This is quite an interesting, a little anecdote actually in a second on this. A very recent anecdote from 2 days ago. But when I was 6 years old, I told him I didn't believe in God. And he told me, he said, well, that's fine, but keep an open mind. He said, this is a question you have to answer for yourself.
Yeah.
He said, I'll always discuss this with you, but ultimately it's one of those questions in life you've got to make your own mind up on. I say it's an interesting question, that, because it just shows you how sort of like father, like son. I was sat up here in this very room a couple of days ago doing some editing. My wife was downstairs talking with my little lad. He's five years old, year younger. And she was talking about throwing a spider out the house. And I could hear him saying about, why don't you just kill it? And she said, well, it's one of God's... My wife doesn't believe in God, but she said it's one of God's creatures.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Over in the UK, there is an awful lot of anecdotal things that we would say.
And he sort of... and he said, what do you mean, Mummy? And she said, well, he's what God creates these creatures or whatever. And he said, well, I don't believe that, Mummy. He said, I just think they've come about. He said, millions and millions of years ago, Mummy, life started and these things have come about. There's no such thing as God. That's just a bit silly.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought, this is like father. I haven't told him that. I haven't told him. I have lots of discussions about science with him, but he's obviously maybe mentally of a similar sort of frame of mind to me, I think.
No, I can get you, man. Yeah. That gives me hope, because you're describing what your father did with you, and it is similar to what I would do with my daughter. We would watch space documentaries. I'm very, I love my math. I talk about this. We're doing this.
Yeah.
She even knows my icon when she sees me wearing my t-shirt. Oh, Mathpig, and she is.
I think it's a great way. It's a great way to go. But that was what spurred me into... Yeah. I sort of got a little bit sidetracked there. That's what spurred me into getting into YouTube, really. And what happened is I was always having these conversations with my dad, and he was always discussing. And he'd be reading books on things like special relativity or quantum mechanics. And obviously there's all these mind-boggling, people with beams of lights on trains and train stations and stuff with two-slit experiments where you're sending just one photon down, and yet you're still getting a sort of diffraction pattern and all this kind of stuff. And it was mind-boggling him. And as a sort of 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old, he was discussing these things with me. And then years later, so when would it be? 2007, maybe something like that. Dawkins released The God Delusion, and we'd watched some Richard Dawkins stuff before. Was it 2006? Whenever it was, he wrote that book, and we'd watched Dawkins before. My dad always had quite strong opinions on Richard Dawkins, which is that he thought he was right, but he thought he was arrogant and too abrasive, right?
Yeah,
which is probably a fair summation.
Your fucking dad's brilliant. I think he's great. He's correct in what he's saying, but he should stick to biology. That's what I say. Yeah.
But he'd seen this news on Newsnight. There was Richard Dawkins was on Newsnight talking about the book, so he sent me it, and I said, "Look, I think I can see about this. I'll better find online about it." So I looked at this clip on Newsnight, and I thought, you know what, I'll buy the book and have a read. And it was things that I'd not really thought about for a few years, and that sort of built up a little bit of an interest again. And then you start looking for things, don't you? Specific arguments. Yeah. And I started looking on YouTube, and it started with the Richard Dawkins of this world and people like that, and the Daniel Dennett's and people like that talking. And then I started seeing people that were like me, just sat in front of a camera talking and stuff. And I'd got a camera, sort of webcam, stuffed in a drawer. I'd never even connected a webcam to my computer. And I mean, it was a different era then. It was like 240p. It was like a top-notch webcam.
The hair was a lot longer and a lot more blonde.
Yeah, it certainly was. Yeah. And so I'd watched a few of these videos, and then in the end I wanted to respond to one of them. The very first 2 or 3 videos I put up, I sort of took down since. I've still got them at home. And it's mainly me sort of going, like this. And I look at it now and I think, why didn't you re-record it? Why did I just do it once? Why didn't I think about what I was going to say and do it again? But that's really what got me started, really, you know.
Well, that's good, because that's usually my first question. But considering that you're going that long, I didn't want to jump straight in with it. But it's great that we ended up in that. That's excuse me. Another thing I wanted to say is the reason recently that I have reached out to yourself, Noel, is because, you know, the whole fucking video that you did last week or the week before, whatever it was, with X being atheists. And I think just randomly 2 weeks before it, there was that things that atheists need to shut the fuck up about and stop doing. Yeah. And one of them was babies as atheists, and it's basically the same fucking thing, right? And it really did. There's a person in the chat there, BRAINBUG, who is a patron of the channel, a very good friend of myself, and he sat and listened to me rant for, I think, a good 40 fucking minutes, and I was very angry. And the reason that it was is because of the repeat that I'm seeing that's starting to happen. Now, I only came into the community in the particular time that I joined the community. Is what happened was I took maybe 6-7 years off the internet. I had a relationship. It was possibly longer than that. We couldn't afford the internet, you know. And I had no... And then coming onto the internet, I found Iron Ra. I found Dark Matter. I found... the cartoon guy. Can't remember. He doesn't do that much anymore. But regardless, whatever.
What, Non-Stamp Collector?
That's the one. Yes, found them 3, right? That was what I started following. And finding the community as a whole, and then creating my own after that, was through the Non Sequitur show when Aaron Ra debated Kent Hovind, because I'd never seen anything live. So that's when I came into the community. I think that was April 2018 or so. And it's now gone 2 years, and I've seen, you know, I'm not obviously as long as yourself, but I've seen some people come, some people go, and stuff like that. And it's the same fucking rows now that's starting to appear, the same arguments, and I really don't like repeat. If Pork Granny's my mother, she turns off for some streams. If Pork Granny's in the chat, she'll fucking tell you, I absolutely hate repeating myself. It drives me insane. If people need a hand, I'll obviously explain it again. But if you're going to just keep doing the same thing over and over again, just not listening to me, and I have to keep repeating it. But yeah, the repeat is starting to happen, and it's really, not that I'm burnt out. I still want to do my content. Hopefully I'll, you know, be original. But from an outside perspective, is this like the 5th time this has happened? The 2nd time?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a constant one. There are some that sort of cycle around. I mean, the rocks, I don't think it ever goes away. I think the babies, you portray them both the same, that the babies are atheists has a little bit of not so much validity about it. I don't think they're well categorised as atheist. But I can understand the origins of that, which was there were some Christians who were talking about people born as Christians. And really what they were doing is they were taking the perspective that we have an innate inclination towards supernaturalism, which I'm sure is true. And I'm sure there are experiments with other animals. They have pigeons where you can sort of, every time a light goes on, a seed drops, but it doesn't actually. Sometimes the seed will drop anyway, or they peck a board, and sometimes the seed will drop and sometimes it won't. But they'll start to see a link in things and that aren't there. And I'm sure we have a tendency to see relationships and links that aren't there. And we are looking for explanations in things, as we do in nature. If there's lightning, there's a lightning god, or all this kind of stuff. But portraying that then as a sort of people are born theists, and then it gets even more ridiculous. They're born Christians or whatever. They're born believing in our particular God. And so I think as a reaction to that, I can kind of understand.
Well, it's not the argument in particular. I would, is the phrase, it's more a symptom than the cause. I'm starting to see, and I don't know about you personally, man, right? And I'm sure it is, but we do this to try and make a small difference. Right now, it's not so bad over here in the UK. I'm in Northern Ireland. You're over in mainland England or whatever it is. We don't have as many fundamentalists and stuff over here. But in Northern Ireland, we have the DUP. They're Bible bashers. They aren't fundamentalists, but they're not fucking far off it. And as a Protestant over here and grown up in a very Protestant area, if I stated the things that I agreed with, they're fucking in line with Sinn Féin. I get my knees done in, and it's religion, and from that sort of perspective and a cultural perspective, from a law sort of perspective, needs to be got rid of. I do agree with secularism. I do agree with humanism. And these are the things that we need to start to push. The problem is we're just fucking baldy-headed bastards on the internet slobbering stuff. We don't really have any sort of power. And what I'm trying to do here, with the small community that we have, the goal is probably never a fucking achieve it. But what we're aiming for is to try and create not just an online community, but having someone 15 minutes up the road. Critical Cripple's only 200 miles from me. That's someone I could physically go and see. All right, he's in a different area, but we're trying to create people together so we can physically make a difference in the real world. As you have pointed out with your surveys and stuff, religion is dying away. And there is things that we don't need to give a fuck about. But there is things right now that we do need to change. And, we need to move from just being baldy-headed assholes with a mouth on the internet to actually changing something in real life.
Yeah, you're right. And there are issues. I've had my fingers burnt a few times, actually, with Northern Ireland. We're talking about the UK and not remembering that actually the situation in Northern Ireland is often significantly different in related issues. But there are issues, of course, across the UK. The number of faith schools is just state funded. It's almost like funding an extra lane on the motorway just for Catholics or extra NHS hospitals.
On a very
just
short,
for Anglicans or something.
Yeah, on a short version, because anyone who's watched the channel before, and I'll bore you and everybody will fucking leave. But on a personal note, my daughter is a Catholic. Her mother is a Catholic. We agreed that she would be Catholic on the birth certificate for the cultural things that they go through, the christening, the birthday, and these things that get all the.
Does it say when you say on the birth certificate in Northern Ireland? Does it specify?
Yes, it specifies to the point, man, where they actually changed the government issued. I watched the woman on the computer do it. It was down as city of birth Londonderry, and whenever we said Catholic, they actually deleted Londonderry and wrote it in as Derry.
Right.
It's very cultural over here, and not that she wanted to go through our daughter to go through them things. That's fine. And I've sort of lost my point because you caught me there and I've ran off. Oh yes, personally with the schools.
Just in the ways it's still
with the schools.
Germain. Yeah.
Where she was born, there is 3 or 4 Catholic schools, and there is one government-run secular school that accepts everyone. And we put her on the list. We put that at the top of our list. But it means that if there's anyone Protestant in the area, they obviously can't go to the 3 or 4 Catholic schools. They have to go to the government-run secular school, you know.
Yeah.
And I did not want my daughter going to a fucking school run by the Catholic Church where, you know, not only do they segment by religion, they're going to segment by or by gender as well. And it's definitely something that we didn't want. We were lucky enough in August, we found out that she has been accepted, which is great. And it's only at the small level, but the fact that she's in there at the preschool level means that she's going to be better accepted for the primary and the secondary, you know. That's good.
My lad goes to a Church of England school because there are so many schools in the area, and there's two really, really good schools. One of them is a secular, non-denominational school, and the other one's a Church of England school. So that was our second choice, and it's kind of odd. So he comes back talking about things which are matters of fact and not conjecture, effectively.
Yeah.
But then talking about the baby Jesus and all this kind of stuff, and it just seems kind of really odd. And I've no objection to faith schools. My objection is to faith schools that I'm paying for, that you're kind of paying for extra options or for a foot up the ladder for beliefs. I don't know if you saw the video that I made a couple of years ago about the levels. It was about one of the latest British social attitude surveys, and extrapolating the number of adherents to the Church of England in the UK. And within my lifetime, within a couple of generations, it will be down. So people of my son's age, sort of in the teenage years, it will be down to less than 1% of them will be Church of England, which is, and yet they will still be running, along with more than the Catholics, but it's about a third of schools, about 2/3 of primary schools, you know, and it's this tiny fraction of the population. And as they pointed out, there was a study done by one of these sort of think tanks, a religious think tank in the UK, pointing out that the people that will be remaining in the Church of England, it's becoming more and more of the evangelical wing is growing. It's not actually getting bigger, but proportionally it's getting bigger. Because all these
so what you're saying is religion as a whole is dying, but the evangelism is growing.
So they will end up running the Church of England. And although numerically they may be very, very small, if they're still running a third of the schools in the UK that are state-funded, right, something's gone very, very wrong there, hasn't it?
Well, as a whole, you have pointed out before, you know, and it's something that I think that we all know, you know, colloquially, it's something that we all do accept, that as religion is, as a whole, is dying, you know, over the world. It is dying. And something that I found out, you know, well, not found out, but something that I thought was very pointed is, you said it, everybody knows it and accepts it, but we try to do our best. We may convert one or two people, not the ones that we're talking to, usually the fucking audience, but that's the point. But, you know, it balances out for what you lose to what you gain. The overall drop in religion is down to age groups. It's down to, I think the people growing up are more skeptical. I definitely think that even though it's not being pushed in education and in schools as much as I would like it to, but I think skepticism and logic are being pushed. You know, there is more people falling away from it. A problem with the internet with that, though, and having so much to make people think, is you do get these people who will fall away from religion, but as to be pejorative, the sheep with the internet can't tell the difference between what's true and what's being pushed as a lie, the narrative. You know, I think education needs to push more what is real and what they can tell the difference between what is actual fact and what is not, because they have information available to them at the fingertips. You know, kids at 10 are getting mobile phones.
Yes, that's right. And I think from the perspective of people that grow up in not very religious households, there might be nominally Christian households or whatever, there's a big difference, I think, with them than the people that grow up in a very religious household. Religious is pushed and then lose their religion. And then you sometimes hear people talk about having a kind of God-sized hole. There's a God-sized hole without God. I always think of that as a little bit like, sort of like having a tumour or something. That it's true that if you have a large tumour removed, there's a tumour-sized hole.
Yeah.
But that's only for people that have had that tumour. Right? If you've never had that tumour, the hole isn't there. But as a result of that, you get a lot of these people then online, And I think that they're sometimes looking for something else. They're picking up on something else, and they end up leaving the organized religion that they had, but the mindset is still kind of there.
Yes.
And they just end up with something else. And I think sometimes they're the people that cause the most problems online, or have the most radical views, or create these other things that then we end up discussing. Is this a new religion? You know, is this kind of person? And sometimes then they end up going back to religion anyway, and they've refound Christianity again and all this kind of thing. Whereas the people who it's just this sort of natural attritional process, that their parents were less religious than their grandparents, and their parents are more accepting of not being religious, and they're in a society that's more accepting of it, and so they just end up, you know, growing up with no religion. I had a friend at school whose parents were both pretty religious. His mother became a lay preacher, and my friend, he's got 3 brothers, and they're all atheists, you know, and that was a sort of perfect example of it's just a generational thing. His parents were still believers, but none of the kids were, and that's a much more organic process. I think it's a much more solid base.
Yeah,
you know.
Totally agree. I've described my grandmother, which would be my mother's mother, not even knowing, I said to her, I think it was last year, we were just joking back, well, not joking, just sort of half talking about this, because she's seen the computer set up and was asking and stuff, and we were talking about the Bible, and her actual now she's 83, 84, her education on the Bible and the Lot story stopped whenever the wife turned to a pillar of salt. And I made a joke about incest, and she was like, there is no incest in the Bible. And I was like, there clearly is. You know the story of Lot? And she was like, yes. But it ended at that point. My granny is very, she would be very Christian. She would be very like that. Now, my mother, I refer to as spiritual Christian, because she's like, yeah, God's everywhere. I don't need to go to a church. She believes what she wants. That's it. She's grand. And when I left the religion at 11, she was very accepting of that, to the point where whenever my religious friends would come around and start arguments, she would laugh and leave, because I know the Bible better than them. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So
I think that's part of the death of religion, though. I think when one of the things with Muslims in the West is that they do, and you've got to take your hat off to them in a way, in that a lot more of them actually take their religion seriously and believe what they say they believe, right? It's not just a sort of hand-waving thing. But the great thing about that hand-waving thing, and effectively it'll be a good sign from our perspective as Islam in the West goes down that path, is that once it starts to break down, it becomes a bit more tolerant, and it becomes a bit more open-minded, and live and let live, and maybe you don't believe the same thing as me, but that's okay. It's the kiss of death for religion, that. Yeah. It's absolutely the kiss of death for religion, that, because it doesn't survive in that. I think it needs to keep pushing everything down and saying, no, you will believe the same as we do, and you will, this is the orthodoxy, and this is what you're going to believe, otherwise we're going to start, we will turn our face away from you, sort of thing. Without that, I think it starts to die on its arse, quite frankly. Well, and that's what's happened. That's what's happened in most of the UK, really.
A lot of my audience would be American. I think it's 80% or 86% or something like that of my audience would be American. And from what I find with dealing with a lot of Americans and talking to a lot of Americans, is it would be extremism. You wouldn't have that middle ground. And when you have built it up and you have become an evangelist, it is to a point. I don't want to say, because they have that fundamentalist view, and it's so hard to break. But once you break it, it's like, oh, fuck. It creates so many holes. Where over here in the UK, I find that when I talk to people who have lost faith, I find a lot more spiritual people. I do like to have these conversations in real life, and I do tell guests this when they come on, but I have a black ST with tinted out windows with 666 as the license plate. I like to draw attention and have these conversations in real life. And I do find that when I meet a lot of people over here, they still do have the deistic view. They still... there's something there. There's not that. They just don't take that last step. Where I find in America, you do get a lot of fundamentalists, and whenever it breaks, they go full hog. I'm an atheist, anti-theist, or whatever.
You're right. Probably there's a statistic I gave in a video a year or two ago. A fascinating statistic that cropped up in a YouGov survey, where they'd asked people about their belief in God, and quite bizarrely, of those people that identified as Christians in this survey in the UK, 45% of them didn't believe in God. 45% of them, when they were given a choice, do you believe in God? Yes, it was either, do you believe in God? Do you believe that there's a sort of higher, there's a spiritual force in the universe, but not a God? Or do you believe there's neither? Only 55% of Christians believed in God. But like you say, there's quite a high chunk that believe in this sort of non-specific spirit. There must be something.
I called it the Akashic field. When I went through it for about 6 years, I called it the Akashic field. That's the sort of idea of energy everywhere, and your consciousness rejoins it and all that sort of bollocks.
Yeah. But then a lot of that, I think, is just that people are ignorant. They're just scientifically ignorant. And when you speak to people that, and I don't mean that in a sort of nasty way, but people just aren't really that interested in science. And so when you see something that they don't know the explanation for, it's like a great mystery, right? They just sort of assume this must sort of beyond our understanding. They don't go and check it out because they're not really motivated to. They may be intelligent enough to, in some cases, but they're not just motivated to. So you add all those things together, and they'll look at them all and think, well, there's got to be something behind all of this, to make it all make sense or to explain these different things.
What's the wonderful ability of the human mind to compartmentalize?
Yeah,
this exists, that's it. Doesn't matter that my mobile phone using general relativity is there for my GPS. Doesn't matter as long as my GPS doesn't put me into a river. I don't really give a fuck, Well,
here's a wonderful example of that. A little anecdote from a few years back. I'd read. Can you remember Ken R. Miller, he's a Catholic who's an evolutionary biologist, and he was the guy. He was like the main hammer knocking the nail in the trials, the Dover Kitzmiller trials in the States with the intelligent design, when there was a group of, I think there were teachers who...
Oh yes, I remember the argument. I don't remember the names, but I remember what you
Ken Miller was a Catholic biologist. Incredible. He does a great book called, I think it's Finding Darwin's God. And he was like, he presented all the scientific evidence in the court, and he's really, really good. There's some great, if you look him up on YouTube, you'll still find a couple of sort of, there's a lecture there where he's given a talk about the stuff he presented in court, and he's wearing sort of brown suede jacket. If you find it's really good, it's got
leather patches on the shoulder or on the elbows.
Well worth a watch. He's really, really good. He is. But he wrote this book, Finding Darwin's God, and I read the book and I emailed him, and I had an email exchange with him. And talk about compartmentalizing, because the book's a really good book, Finding Darwin's God. The first half of the book is all about evolutionary biology and how we know it's true. And there's some really, really great arguments and examples and laying it out. And then he explains some of that from a Catholic perspective, from a Christian perspective, and how it fits in. Then he starts talking towards the end of his book about his faith. And it's like a switch has flicked, and he's talking about things that just don't sit. And he kind of says, I don't even try and reconcile. You're talking about compartmentalizing. I don't even try and reconcile these things. So I emailed him, and I was interested at the time. It's something I'm going to be remaking a video on about the soul and how we know that an immaterial, immortal soul doesn't exist. And I was asking about some things that were related to that video and how it fitted in, because obviously his position is that there's no creationism, no intelligent design. His view is that God set the process in motion, knowing the kind of outcome that you would get sentient, self-aware agents down the line who would be able to know him. They might not necessarily look like us, but that God had set that process in motion. That's what he believes, and that there's no intervention anywhere along the lines. Okay, that's fine. My position was, how can we be imbued with an immaterial, immortal soul which hasn't evolved? It's not part of the process, because that ensoulment is happening every time. Or if it is part of the process, how does it take place? Because it isn't encoded in your DNA. I mean, there's some people who say, well, yes, my understanding of the soul is the emergent property of the mind, but that isn't something that survives your material death, right? So that's not what Catholics and Christians generally are talking about. So I asked him about this. How does he fit in his understanding of evolutionary biology with the idea of us having an immaterial, immortal soul that can survive our death, that can take account of our sins, so must have some culpability for our actions, that can receive reparations from God effectively if you were born with cancer and only died in pain 2 weeks down the line. And his answer was, I mean, fair dues to him, engaged with me. We had a few emails back and forth, but his argument effectively was this: well, I don't even try to.
Yeah.
I don't even try to. One of them's my faith. The soul, that's my faith. And the biology, the evolutionary biology, that's my science.
Yep.
And I don't even try. I've never, and I just, for me, I can't get my head around that. I've never, even my sort of love life, my wife, my child, my family, even with them, I have a more rational perspective on it than that. I can't compartmentalize it to that degree. It's a totally different way of thinking, I think.
No, I that's basically my mother. In the 26 years that I've worked through, from anti-theism to this, that, and the other, to come where I am now, as Dave in the back room keeps shouting at me, I must define myself as an agnostic atheist so everybody knows what I'm talking about. Right?
I ought to just put up. I can't actually see any comments because I knocked them down. I ought to just try and get up there again. But mute the sound this time because it's causing me a few issues.
But that's exactly where I would put my mother. She has her beliefs. That's it. Doesn't give a fuck. Leave me alone. And I've had that conversation once with her. There is no need to have any other of a conversation because she's came to her points of view. She understands it. And that's it. Just let me be. I believe in that
exactly.
guy.
Yeah. It's not going to make her happier anyway. If you disabuse her of her faith, it's not going to do her any favors. And it's not gaining anything, is it? I've always been a firm sort of believer. If somebody doesn't want to have, I mean, obviously, I still have these conversations with people, as do you. Whereas really, we know that it's a generational thing. That's going to make the difference. But I don't have these conversations with people who don't want to have them. If you're happy with your faith, and as long as you're not trying to impose it on everybody else, and you're playing by the sort of rules of society in the way that we have our social engagements and social arguments over issues, then I don't really have an issue with that. I'm not going to try and take your faith away from you and make you feel, like, oh my Christ, my whole life's been waste of time, or I'm going to die and it's going to be the end, and what's going to happen, or whatever,
Yeah, we don't want to encourage existential crisis. Especially at a later age in life and things like that. If they're happy, they're doing their thing, they promote the main things that matter. Like, don't get
exactly.
My mother's very progressive. She promotes all the correct things. In my opinion, she promotes all the correct things to a certain degree. I have called her a bigot every now and again because as she gets a little older, she's all, them damn Catholics won't let us fucking build a house. It's nothing to do with the fact that we live in an area that has a Catholic MP. That's just the way it is. If there was a Protestant MP there, the rules would still say this, but it's just because we, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. One thing I do notice, man, that I always notice in the background of your streams is that wee sign, which, if I can get this right, which would be over to your right-hand side, over your back right-hand shoulder.
Beware the zombies.
No, not beware the zombies.
The one that's don't worry. It's not...
Do beware of zombies, but you're more intelligent than what you think you are. Is that what it says? Or always remember?
No, it says trust yourself. You know more than you think you do. Exactly. That is actually my wife's. That's my wife's.
Oh, well, there's no point in talking about it. I'm giving you credit for nothing.
I can't take credit. I can take credit for these. I had a guy made these up for me. Noel Plum Internet Shitlord and Noel Plum the Patriarchy Personified, which was as a result of a couple of engagements I'd had with PZ Myers. I wasn't
seen a few videos. I haven't watched the most recent one because, to be honest, I don't give a fuck about him.
No.
That's one of them videos where I'm not watching the drama, But something like that's in the background, it's been there for years, man. It's been there for a long time, and I think it's very, very encouraging. My girlfriend would always say that to me as well, and something she did get me for my birthday is, I don't know if you've watched Game of Thrones. I only recently have watched it because she fucking made me. But
did you enjoy it though?
That's it. No, man, we're not. My girlfriend is MOMMA Atheist. We are doing a show on Game of Thrones where we are going to talk about it and fight about it. Subscribe to her channel.
But I mean, there's dragons, right? There's political intrigue. There's people having their heads split open and tits. I mean, what more could you want in there? That's everything, isn't it?
The reason I go down that route is because she got me a cup from Tiernan. And it's something that was quite poignant, I thought was funny, because being Irish, you do have this stereotypical idea of, we're drunk every night and we're an absolute mess and stuff. And I only have a formal education up to 18, but the cup says, I drink and I know stuff. That's a very good phrase that I think is poignant to me. But it's something that's inspirational in the background. I thought that, it means nothing.
I'm afraid I can't take credit for that. No.
One thing I did want to ask you, man, if you do have a statistic that you could throw at anyone that is your favorite statistic, something either to point towards atheism, something to point towards the realism, something that you could use because there's an argument on the internet that people need slapped up the ass on. What, because you are one for surveys, you are one for statistics. And I think that that's very, very good because data drives us.
Yeah, I suppose, talking about the conversations we've had, the statistic that would come to mind would simply be, again, they did a wonderful table of this a few years back in the national, the social, sorry, not the British, it was a social attitude survey, where they asked the same question. Roughly every 10 years they ask the same question, and they've got the data now for the different cohorts. They've asked it for about 40 years, this question, of the different age groups in terms of, do you believe in God? And of course it's a particularly important statistic, this, because I don't know if it's phrased the same in Northern Ireland. I think it is, but in the census they're always interested in religious affiliation. They're not interested in whether you believe in God, and they're quite clear about that. They say, we know our statistics are a bit misleading. It makes the place sound makes the country sound more religious and more spiritual than it is, but we want to keep the consistency, and this is what local authorities are interested in. So the social attitude survey has always been important on this, because they don't preload the question with asking you other cultural questions beforehand, so you're already feeling affiliated to your sort of social groups.
Well, questions and research can be leading, as you pointed out.
Yes, exactly. So you're not thinking, when they say you're a Christian, you're Muslim, in the census, you're not thinking, do I believe in God and all this lot. You're thinking, culturally, how was I brought up, sort of thing. But anyway, the social attitude survey did this wonderful table where they show for the different cohort groups their levels of God belief. And every 10 years they ask them, and of course the cohorts shunt up a block. So you can see as you look through, it's quite a wonderful pattern as you look along the diagonals as each survey goes along, and the cohort groups in the year older group, you can see how the levels of religiosity pan across. And I think that's quite remarkable. And then another one that I found, and I couldn't get the data for this, I had to make these ones myself, was...
Oh, then they're fake news. Fake news.
No, there's a pattern in the UK of how religiosity has declined and irreligiosity has increased, sort of like this. But I could never see the data for... I'm just going to pour my beer because it's starting to foam out the top there. If I pour it in the glass, it'll be okay. I could never find the data for most of the rest of Europe. And then I found... there is an organisation that compiles all this data across Europe, but it's not presented in graphical form. So I had to sort of do all the legwork on this, and to construct the graphs, you have to do it on their site. I mean, you could tabulate it all and do it, but I'm doing it on the site, and it kept crashing. And I spent about 6 hours to get about 2.5 hours work out of this thing. Well, I created a whole series of graphs, and what was interesting was right across Europe, with a few exceptions, the same pattern is taking place, but at different stages, and you could see how it kicks in. It's like it falls off a precipice. It's like there's a level of irreligiosity where, or maybe acceptance of irreligiosity, it's hard to say which it is, where suddenly it kicks in, and then these graphs start going like this. And the pattern is repeated in country after country after country, just at different points in it. And I found those quite compelling as well. Quite reassuring, really, because when we're talking about atheist communities online and what's good and what's bad and all this kind of thing, you know, I've become all kind of sanguine about it, really, because at the end of the day, I don't think it matters, really. It's great, like there's the support aspect that you talked about, and I think that's something that's really important. But in terms of what things are going to be like 50 years' time, 100 years' time, it ain't going to make any difference.
Nothing we do matters.
Yeah. Western societies are going to be, you know, religion is going to have pretty much died on its ass. There'll still be some religion, but it'll be that will very, very much be in the minority, I think.
Well, everybody, thanks very much for the last ever Mathpig episode. I've no point in me doing the channel anymore because it's going to change anyway. Oh, excuse me. No, Noel, you're exactly right, man. It's changing as it is. We try and do what we can. And at the end of the day, is there any chance of you shutting up? You know, no, you feel these ways. We feel, you know, I like to talk, I like to ramble, we do like to do this. And the odd time, you know, I've had maybe in the year of doing this 3 comments that have really brought tears to my eyes. I'm a manly enough man to say that. But there has been, you know, certain people who have reached out, and there's been maybe, you know, 2 or 3, 4 comments or whatever that have, you know, not that I've made a difference in their life, but they've said something that's affected them. That's like, it's worth it for that small amount that we can affect people, you know.
It is, and certain people do need the support as well, you know. I fully intend in 40 years' time to be still trying to rack my brain to find a new way to make a video as to explain why rocks aren't atheists. You know, I mean, I'm quite happy to keep doing that every now and again.
Oh man, if my mouse had been quick enough, I'd have fucking kicked you there, were you?
But it's something. Can I just say?
Go for
it. Before we wrap.
Well, we're going to move over to the after party if you are up for another half hour, 40 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. That's no problem. Yeah. It's always something that's frustrated me. The biggest thing with this sort of the movement atheism, which I've never really had a lot of time for personally, because it's never really been relevant to me where I live and the sort of society I live in, I suppose. But it's always seemed to me that because with any atheist society, there are certain things that they can do, and I've always been appreciative of like the stuff that Michael Nugent does over at Atheist Island, because he tackles real issues and at a decent level gets to speak to people who actually are movers and shakers. But for most of the time, there's not a lot to go on, right? What are you really holding a convention or a conference about? Yeah. The one thing you are is in somewhere like America is to support those people who are living in communities where it is hardest to come out as an atheist. Yeah. And yet so many of the people over there actually just want a little cushy club for left-wing progressive atheists, middle-class atheists who are living in the blue corners of the United States, who don't need any of that, quite honestly, and the sort of red state atheists who they may have conservative views on other issues, and of course they will. You don't abandon everything all in one go anyway. Who maybe need the support more than ever. They didn't want them involved. They're the people that they were trying to push out. And I thought, what are you actually trying to achieve? What is your purpose? If the people that need what you're doing most are the people that you just don't want to be involved in, it just becomes a cushy little club, just a place to go for a few drinks each year and to pat each other on the back as to how clever and wonderfully moral you are. You know, you're not actually achieving anything, I don't think, at that point.
No, I would, again, man, you know, another reason why I like it so much is because our views, I know it's maybe because we grew up in the same sort of circumstances and we grew up in the UK, but you articulate my thoughts an awful lot better than I can articulate my thoughts. I do agree with you on that. You know, we have these problems and these things. DaveCon, that was supposed to happen this year, you know, there was only one real speaker that I wanted to go to, and as much love as I have for David Worley, it was an excuse for fucking all of us to hang about. Because the people that I hang with online, And as much as I see them in their face and we have the crack and you know their mannerisms, you can't high-five them. You know, you can't push the cunt over when he gives you a bit of shit and slap him on the back of the head. You know, they're not actually there. And it's difficult because we are a social species. We like to be together, and it's difficult to not have that. So these conventions are an excuse, so to speak, for us all to get together. if we did keep pushing this and be more mainstream, then it wouldn't be that, because you'd have had the crack at the weekend with the guy that's 100 mile up the road. You know, we're trying to bring everyone closer. We're trying to do that. There is some people in the community, like Dave that's in the backstage, that has helped us with some programming that's made this look as nice as what it is. You know, I have helped 3 and 4 channels now set up for live streaming and things like that there, and you know, I set up Discords for people, and we do this to help the community as a whole, and that's what we're trying to do here. Even on a fucking Thursday, we have open hangouts up to 9 people now, and the second week we had a young Earth creationist, an ancient alien, and a flat earther against 3
an ancient alien, not an actual ancient alien, somebody who believes in ancient aliens.
Well, and on that topic, man, they are in the, well, I'm bastardizing Richard's beliefs. All right, Richard is a very good friend of mine. I refer to Richard as my online brother. I have spent 9 months now doing series with him every Thursday, but Richard has his own beliefs. I'm using a stereotype because, as you know, man, as evil and as nasty as stereotypes are, they're fucking needed sometimes.
Well, and they're useful,
They are very useful. So for that, it gives you a general idea.
Yeah,
Richard, if you're still in the chat, I will give you the link and you can come in and talk to Noel. But this is the point I'm trying to make, man, is on a Thursday, we have these open hangouts. We try and break down the barriers. We try and build the bridges that have been burnt down. We bring in everybody from every sort of awakened view to be more of a skeptic community, because as much as atheism has brought us all together, I think skepticism and logic and things like that should be pushed more. Atheism may come out of it at the end. It may, and it probably will statistically, but we need to push that more than the atheism. I'd rather be a skeptic than an atheist, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I do understand. Yes, because it perfuses everything, doesn't it? Every aspect of thinking. Whereas really, whether you believe in God or not, unless you believe that you have a mandate to impose your moral positions on everybody else, then it doesn't really matter a lot of the time whether you believe in God or not.
No. It's
interesting. It's interesting.
It does. It's rabbit hole territory, man.
It's a scientific question, doesn't it?
Yeah. How this close to the end of the stream, it's rabbit hole. We'll leave it for the after party. We'll go to the after party because I know your time is limited. So, what we will do is, I will just say thank you, Noel. Really do appreciate you, man.
It's a pleasure.
I think that if nobody has subscribed, both his channels are in the description. You know, look down, hit the button and all that. I really do think that Noel performs a very objective view for the community that we do evolve in. He's out in other ones, and if you were looking at a Venn diagram, there's lots of circles overlapping. But from an outside point of view, I think Noel really does do that very, very well, and I would definitely recommend everyone and anyone to subscribe to the man. So, other than that, I will say thank you everyone for watching. A huge thank you to my Patreons. I have a 3 terabyte drive sitting beside me. I've just lost my SATA cable. Can't plug the fucker in yet. But we will get that up and going, and that's down to the Patreons that support the channel. So thank you very much for that. And Noel, again, thank you. We'll be back in 10-15 minutes. I think Critical Cripple has done the shot for the after party. Jump in. Anybody wants into the after party, tweet at me. And Richard, we'll get in. I know you don't tweet. We'll get at you in some other way. And everybody, on that note, we will oink and out.